Hey guys, tonight we're tracing the slow unraveling of one of those nights that begins with too much laughter and ends with no answers at all. You're in the heart of Brighton Cove, a sleepy coastal town with postcard beaches, creaky pubs, and secrets that settle like salt in the wind. It's just past 2:00 a.m. on May 12th, 2019, and you're wobbling down the cobblestone street in 4-inch heels, skin tingling in the chilly sea air, trying to hold it together after one too many raspberry ciders. Behind you, the warm hum of the Gull's Nest pub still spills into the night. Neon signs flickering in puddles and bass, thumping behind brick walls. Your friends begged you to stay, maybe grab a cab together, but you waved them off. You were fine. You're always fine. That's what you tell yourself as you lean on a lamppost. The world's seesawing just a little too much. That's when the car pulls up. It's a gray sedan, older model. Clean but nothing flashy. The window slides down and a voice, almost too chipper for this hour, calls out, "Need a lift." You squint. A man smiling at you, bakery cap on backwards, warm voice with a slight Brighton accent. Name's Caleb. He adds, "You all right walking in those?" You half laugh, gesture vaguely at the direction your car's supposedly in, and against better judgment, whatever's left of it, you get in. They say the human brain's hardwired to sense danger micro-expressions, off vibes, the way a person pauses before answering. But tonight, your inner radar is drowned in gin and tonic, and Caleb's smile is just wholesome enough to pass as trustworthy. The car clicks locked. You don't notice. As the sedan hums through dim residential lanes, he makes small talk about baking schedules and pre-dawn routes. You try to answer, but your head feels heavy, eyelids thick. You lean against the window for just a moment. 1 minute, you're watching the rows of Victorian terraces drift by, and the next, it's dark. This is where the story tilts. Because it's tempting to believe you wake up the next morning, head pounding, a funny tale to text your friends. But instead, your last known sighting becomes someone else's burden. By sunrise, Marco, your boyfriend of 2 years, wakes alone in your shared flat. At first, it's not panic. He assumes you crashed with friends, but as he scrolls his phone, he notices the last message you was sent was hours ago. A sloppy selfie captioned, "I'm fine, LOL," but you're not answering now. The first pang of worry hits when he checks your location, but the signal's dead. Nothing since 2:34 a.m. He calls, no answer. Calls again, voicemail. He sends a quick, "Hey, all good," then stares at the typing dots that never come. That horrible stillness of technology where hope flickers with every buzz. He spends the next hour pacing, calling friends. No one's seen you. Your coat's still at the pub. It's 11:00 a.m. when Marco calls your parents. By 1:00 p.m. He's at the police station, filed under concern. Missing adult. Likely voluntary departure. Police aren't too eager. You're 21. Adults vanish for nights all the time. They see it every week. Some wander off, some ghost relationships, some just need space, but they don't know you the way Marco does. You wouldn't vanish without at least sending a meme. That evening, Marco gets a text, unknown number. "Hey, this is Caleb, the guy who gave Ilona a ride last night. You doing okay? Your name." Sent to your boyfriend, from someone he's never heard of. The blood drains from his face. He stares at the message like it might explode. And then he calls the police again, this time shaking. The phone number is traced to a prepaid burner. The name Caleb Morgan doesn't ring any immediate bells. But Marco starts scouring social media, eventually buried in a tagged birthday photo for someone named Lacey, who once worked at a cafe near the pier. There's a man with a bakery uniform and that same sunny smile. A little digging reveals Caleb Morgan is 27, lives in a modest flat above his uncle's fish and chips shop, drives a gray 2006 Toyota Corolla, works the overnight delivery route for Granger's Bakery. No criminal record, no red flags, just a face you wouldn't look at twice in a crowd. You know, historians still argue whether the concept of the uncanny valley where something seems almost human, but just off enough to make your skin crawl, applies to behavior as much as appearances. Caleb is a prime candidate, just enough normal to disarm you, just enough hollow to swallow you whole. There's something morbidly ironic about Brighton Cove. In the 1800s, it was considered a healing town. where sea air and mineral baths were prescribed for nervous conditions. Royalty came to breathe, to mend, to rest. But as the clouds roll in and Marco sits refreshing your phone's location, nothing about this place feels restorative now. You're still missing. Hours slip into night, and the longer your absence stretches, the louder the quiet becomes. You're still in the passenger seat, though now the world has forgotten how to find you. The gray sedan winds along Brighton Cove's outskirts, hugging the cliff road where fog settles in like an old blanket. Streetlights flicker against wet asphalt, and the sea beyond is just a black, yawning mouth. You're half-conscious, swaying a little with the turns. Caleb glances at you, not with concern, but calculation. There's a cold patience behind that bakery boy grin, like he's waiting for the exact moment your body stops resisting the rhythm of motion. He doesn't drive toward your car. You don't even realize you've passed the car park entirely. Later, investigators will piece together that this route doesn't match Caleb's usual delivery route. Instead of taking you anywhere near town or your flat, he detoured into the coastal backroads roads, so narrow and pitted that even locals rarely use them at night. If you'd been awake, you might have felt something was off. But the alcohol and the lull of the engine smooth over everything, even the creeping sense of wrong. He stops the car. You don't move. Now. You won't remember this next part, but it becomes the fulcrum of everything. Caleb says he tries to wake you gently. That you were confused, angry, panicked. That you tried to get out, slipped, hit your head. But Caleb's a man who scrubs the inside of his delivery van with bleach and wipes down his cargo floor for no bakery-related reason. His version of the truth. It's the kind that only shows up when it serves him. And Brighton Cove. It keeps secrets better than it keeps heat. The morning paper doesn't mention you. A local trivia team wins its Friday finals. Someone posts a seagull meme. But there's no trace of you anywhere in the headlines. Marco's doing what he can. He prints missing posters on cheap A4 paper at the corner shop and tapes them to lampposts and bus stops. He knocks on doors, desperate, asking if anyone saw a girl in a pink dress walking alone. Most say no. One woman swears she saw you near the marina, but when pressed, she admits she might have confused you with someone else. The town isn't exactly brimming with energy people keep to themselves here, always have. It's the kind of place where gossip whispers behind curtains and police sigh before lifting a pen. And then there's Caleb. On paper, he's almost boring. Grew up in nearby Saltwood, lived with his aunt until his early 20s, worked odd jobs fishing boat hand, bicycle courier before landing a steady bakery gig. His delivery route was mostly predictable. Early mornings, cafes and diners along the promenade, a few stops at small groceries inland. He once won Employee of the Month and took a photo holding a loaf of sourdough. There's no criminal record, no history of violence, just quiet shifts and decent service tips. But every now and then, someone remembers a weird encounter. An old woman at the bakery says he once refused to meet her eyes and got flustered when she mentioned her granddaughter. A waitress recalls how he'd linger at the counter too long, even when his order was ready. The kind of discomfort you brush off in real time. It's only when you connect the dots that the pattern takes shape. The creepy part, it's not just that Caleb has a van. It's that no one can really describe the inside of it. It's always clean, like unnaturally clean, bleach-scented clean. Someone once asked why he kept the back empty when he wasn't working. He shrugged and said he liked having space. Another time, a coworker asked about the industrial gloves in his glove compartment, just for heavy crates. He smiled. But what bakery crate requires black nitrile gloves and a crowbar? You know how medieval leper hospitals used to isolate their patients in forested huts, far from any town center? They believed disease clung to breath, that proximity to suffering would rot the soul. Caleb's presence gives off that same invisible rot unseen until it's too late. Marco finally convinces the police to interview Caleb 3 days after you disappear. It's a soft interview, non-custodial, polite. Caleb tells them you were drunk, said you insisted on being dropped off by your car, said you didn't want him waiting. He says he watched you walk toward the parking lot, then drove away. It's a tidy, bland story, free of adjectives. The officers jot it down. They nod. They thank him for his time. Outside, Caleb leans against his van, checking his phone, probably reading headlines about football or bakery discounts. Inside the station, Marco is shaking with frustration. Because here's what doesn't make sense. There's no camera footage of you walking into that car park. Your car was still parked in the same spot, untouched. Your phone last pinged near Cliff's End, 3 miles west of where Caleb claims he left you. And yet no arrest, no search warrant, just a verbal, "we'll be in touch." You'd think the law would jump on this, but there's this maddening gray zone in missing persons cases. Without a body or clear evidence of foul play, they hesitate. There's protocol, paperwork, probable cause. It's not like the crime dramas, real life. It's more red tape than red flags. Historians still debate whether the hue and cry system in medieval England, where citizens were legally required to pursue and raise alarm about a fleeing criminal, was more effective than modern bystander apathy. Watching Marco plead for attention from a town that seems half asleep, it's hard not to wish someone would just yell "murderer" and be done with it. But the silence continues. The kind that seeps into your bones, the kind that grows teeth. And somewhere, not far from the crashing surf, the gray sedan pulls into a backlot and waits. Inside, the cargo space is empty. Almost. Marco doesn't sleep. Not really. He closes his eyes, sure, but it's more like blinking with a pillow. Every creak in the hallway, every buzz from his phone jolts him upright. He refreshes your location again, still nothing. He checks your last snap, studies your expression like it's a ransom note. In the video, you're laughing, cheeks flushed, eyeliner a little smudged, and you say, "I'm not even that drunk," right before tripping over your own foot. It's heartbreak in MP4 format. He goes to the police again, pushes harder this time, demands they talk to Caleb again, press him about the GPS data, the inconsistencies. One officer shrugs. "We're looking into it," but you can hear it in their tone. She probably left on her own. A bad night, a regretful morning. She'll turn up, but Marco knows you, and you're already gone. It's May 15th now, and the town of Brighton Cove has begun to notice. Posters multiply. Local Facebook groups go from prayers for Elena to "why isn't anyone doing anything?" And finally, the police dig a little deeper. They request Caleb's delivery van for a voluntary inspection. He agrees. The van, at first glance, is pristine. Windex shine. Pine-scented air freshener swinging from the rearview mirror. No stains, no clutter. But the crime scene tech assigned to it has been doing this for 17 years. He leans into the cargo area and takes a deep breath. Bleach. Not the diluted "I cleaned my kitchen" kinds. Industrial. Overused. It clings to the air in a way that almost burns the back of your throat. And that's not all. Underneath a loose rubber mat near the back panel, they find hair long, dark, consistent with yours. It's been wet, tangled, tugged. There are no fingerprints. None. Not yours. Not his. Nothing but rubber gloves and scrubbed plastic. You know, in ancient Rome, the idea of damnatio memoriae meant erasing someone entirely, chipping their name off stone, scraping their face from murals. Caleb's van is like that, an attempt to erase a presence so completely that it dares the world to prove otherwise. Back at the precinct, Marco sits across from the same two officers. This time, he has a file folder printed screenshots, timeline estimates, inconsistencies, your last text timestamps. He points out that Caleb's version of events doesn't match the GPS trail of his phone. Caleb's pings move steadily west, away from the city, toward the cliffs after he claims he dropped you off. The cops exchange a glance. Something shifts. They ask Caleb to return for questioning. He comes in, calm, maybe too calm, repeats his story, same as before, a little slower this time. He's sweating, but only a little. Still insists he left you near your car. They tell him the GPS shows otherwise. He blinks, then smiles. "I must have got turned around." It's a weak defense, but it's still not enough for an arrest. No body, no direct evidence of a crime, no eyewitnesses placing you in danger. In legal terms, Caleb is still just a person of interest. In emotional terms, he's a black hole. Then, on May 17th, Marco gets a second text. Another unknown number. Another chill. This time it reads, "Still thinking about her. Wish I hadn't helped." No punctuation. No name. Just that weird, nauseating blend of confession and deflection. He brings it to police. They track it again, another burner. Same make and model as before. This time, they trace the purchase to a gas station 20 miles inland. CCTV shows Caleb at the register, buying gum, a soda, and the phone. This is when something finally breaks open. Investigators get a warrant to search Caleb's apartment. It's neat. Predictable, but in the bathroom trash, they find disposable gloves with faint red streaks. And behind a loose wall panel in his bedroom, tucked where even landlords rarely check, they find a small bag of women's accessories, a bracelet, a lip gloss tube, and a key ring with a photo of you and Marco, both smiling under an umbrella. At that point, it's no longer a question of whether something happened. It's just a matter of finding what and where. Interestingly, historians still debate the effectiveness of ancient Chinese ghost courts, where a victim's spirit was symbolically allowed to testify posthumously. The idea was that truth could echo, even when a voice was lost. In Caleb's case, your voice is now louder than his story. With mounting pressure from the community and growing forensic evidence, Caleb quietly leaves Brighton Cove on May 20th, claims it's to visit family. In reality, he's fleeing scrutiny, but he doesn't make it far. On May 23rd, police in neighboring Lancashire arrest him on an unrelated charge, an alleged assault of a woman he picked up outside a different pub. She survived. Barely, fought him off with a set of keys and called 911 from a ditch. DNA under her fingernails matched the same partial profile found on the lip gloss tube in Caleb's apartment. That's when the floodgates open. Authorities from multiple counties begin comparing notes. A team of analysts starts re-examining unsolved missing persons cases along Caleb's old delivery routes. But even with the weight of evidence, one thing still holds the case hostage. They haven't found your body. Marco holds on. But it's getting harder. He spends evenings walking Cliff's End with a flashlight and your old scarf, just in case. And Brighton Cove, it's begun to hum with unease. The local bakery loses customers. People cross the street when they pass Caleb's building. Even the sea seems louder now, more restless, like it knows something it wants to scream. At night, gulls cry above the cliffs, circling something unseen. You wouldn't believe how quickly a town like Brighton Cove turns inward once the story gets real. When you first went missing, there were whispers, curious, concerned, but cautious. It was the kind of gossip people felt safe having over the bakery counter or between car doors in the Tesco lot. But once Caleb's name started spreading, once it was clear you hadn't just run off, the whispers turned to avoidance. You see it in how people stop making eye contact. The pub that last saw you quietly removes its CCTV notice sign. A few regulars claim they didn't remember seeing you leave, even though Marco knows they did. Caleb's former co-workers start leaving out the back door after shifts. One deletes her Facebook. Another stops coming to work altogether. The police department tries to look busy, but the truth is they missed their window. If they'd moved faster, they might have caught Caleb before the second assault, before he had time to clean, before he had time to hide you. Now, they're playing catch-up. A small search unit forms, cobbled together from county investigators, a forensic anthropologist, and a few cadaver dogs. They focus on Cliff's End, the place where your phone last pinged. It's a lonely stretch of overgrown paths, low cliffs, and patches of muddy grass that turn to spongy earth after rain. Local teens used to party here, but lately, it's more trash than memory. You're not here, at least not on the surface. The dogs get hits in a few places, but they're all animal remains or buried trash. No human scent strong enough to suggest you've been nearby recently. Meanwhile, Marco spends most of his days glued to police briefings and forensic updates. Nights, he still walks the cliffs alone, always with your scarf tucked in his coat pocket. He says it still smells like your perfume jasmine and something citrusy. Maybe it does, or maybe he just needs it. You know, medieval European villages often used bell towers to call the community together when someone went missing. A lost soul bell, they called it. In some places, it rang every night until the missing returned or was found. Brighton Cove has no bell, but if it did, it would still be tolling. And then something strange happens. A freelance reporter from a local blog Nothing big. Just a regional crime rundown publishes a piece titled, "The Man Who Always Smiles. Where is Elena Rivera?" It's not particularly well written, but it goes viral. Suddenly, people start talking again. Old classmates share stories of Caleb acting off in sixth form. A woman messages Marco to say Caleb once followed her to her car. Years ago, a barista posts a thread about the time he tried to give her a ride home after closing uninvited. More disturbing still, a former landlord comes forward. He rented Caleb a unit 5 years ago, on the edge of Saltwood. The flat was clean when Caleb left, spotless. In fact, but the landlord remembered a strange smell coming from under the floorboards the week before the lease ended. Thought it was mildew, never checked. Police get a search warrant, and this time, they bring the dogs. What they find is small but damning. A single earring wedged behind a loose panel in the closet. Not yours. Another girl. Another missing case from 3 years back, never solved. The earring still has a smudge of dried blood inside the clasp. Forensics runs it. Partial match. That girl's name was Sophie Lane. And suddenly, Caleb isn't just a suspect, he's a pattern. Marco reads the article at 2:17 a.m., sitting in your favorite chair, the one with the loose spring and the blanket you always fought over. He doesn't cry, he just folds the laptop shut, walks to the kitchen, and throws up in the sink. The world is still pretending it doesn't know where you are. But Marco, he's past pretending. He marches into the station the next morning and demands a meeting with the lead detective. Her name is D.I. Hart. Until now, she's kept her distance cold, efficient, all straight lines and paperwork. But something about Marco. Maybe it's the tremble in his jaw or the photo of you he keeps in his wallet makes her soften. He tells her the same thing he said every day. I know she's near the cliffs. You just haven't looked in the right spot. So Hart does something rare for someone in her position. She listens. They pull in topographical maps, drone scans, and geological reports from the last decade. Turns out, a section of cliff about half a mile from the last phone ping suffered erosion after a storm in 2017. There's a sinkhole there now, narrow, easy to miss, but deep. They organize a new search. This time, Marco goes with them. You know, historians still argue about the purpose of ancient labyrinths. Some say they were spiritual pathways. Others believe they were traps. This part of the search feels like both, a spiritual maze with a single destination. It takes hours. The dogs are jumpy, the wind brutal. The sea crashes louder than usual, as if trying to drown out what's coming. Then one of the dogs stops, whines, scratches at the ground by the edge of a thicket, and everything stills. It's not you, not yet. But buried beneath inches of dirt and bramble, they find fibers, synthetic, pale pink, a thread from a dress. It matches the one you were wearing. The fiber alone doesn't prove anything. At least, not to the kind of people who require body-shaped outlines and blinking neon signs to act. But for Marco, that thread just a few centimeters of worn pink fabric is confirmation. He stares at it as though it's humming. And maybe, in a way, it is. The search team flags the area. They bring in ground-penetrating radar, probing the soft earth around the overgrown thicket where the dog scratched. The cliff nearby is crumbling, one hard rainfall away from collapsing altogether. If Caleb had buried you much closer to the edge, the sea would have taken you along with every trace. But it didn't. Not yet. As investigators cordon off the site, Marco refuses to leave. He stands back with arms crossed, your scarf still peeking out from under his jacket, eyes locked on the dirt like he's afraid you might slip back underground if he looks away. You know, in ancient Egyptian funerary rituals, mourners believed that speaking the name of the dead helped guide their soul into the afterlife. Marco says your name aloud 5 times while they dig, softly, like a prayer, or maybe like an anchor. And then, just before sundown, one of the diggers kneels and stops moving. He says something into his radio. 2 others approach, tools forgotten. No one's breathing quite right, because what they've unearthed isn't a body, not yet, but a human foot. Small, pale, curled at the toes like it was frozen mid-step. It's wearing a heel. The heel Marco helped you pick out the day before your night out. You're here. The medical examiner arrives fast. this time with urgency. They handle the rest with quiet reverence, soft tarps, low voices, a protective canopy of hands to block the view from onlookers. D.I. Hart gently leads Marco away. He doesn't argue, he just walks like someone unplugged him. You are identified that night, and Brighton Cove changes forever. Caleb Morgan is officially charged the next morning. The community, which spent 2 weeks pretending you were just probably fine, now wraps you in candles, laminated photos, and half-melted vigil wax on the pub steps. The same pub where you laughed last. There's an outpourings of grief that feels, to Marco at least, a little too late, but he lets it happen. Caleb, meanwhile, sits in a holding cell. He says nothing for 3 days, not to police, not to his public defender, not even to the other inmates, just stares at the concrete wall like he's watching his own face slowly rot. But pressure is a funny thing, especially the kind applied with surgical precision by someone like D.I. Hart. On the 4th day, she visits him alone. Brings in your photo, the one of you standing on the rocks near the old pier, laughing with your wine-tangled hair in your eyes. She doesn't accuse him. She doesn't raise her voice. She simply sets the photo on the metal table and says, "Her name is Elena. You owe her more than silence." Caleb finally blinks, and he talks, in ancient Norse sagas. There's a term called Nidingur, a word so venomous it was rarely spoken aloud. It meant coward, traitor, monster in human skin, the worst thing you could call a man. Caleb would have earned it tenfold. His confession isn't poetic, it isn't even remorseful. It's mechanical, as if he's describing someone else's actions, someone he watched, but didn't stop. He claims he didn't plan anything, that he offered you a ride out of some warped version of chivalry, that when you passed out, he panicked. He says he only wanted to make sure you were okay, and when you woke up disoriented and tried to leave, things got out of hand. He doesn't say attack. He doesn't say murder. He dances around the truth with phrases like a struggle and a misunderstanding. But the forensic report has no euphemisms. They found bruising consistent with restraint, scratches on the inside of the van roof, your DNA on Caleb's jacket and under the back mat. They found soil under your fingernails matching the cliffside where you were buried. They even found blood traces in the hinges of the van's cargo door. He tried to clean everything, but he didn't account for luminol, or the dogs, or how grief gives people like Marco the stamina of armies. Caleb tells them he buried you just before sunrise, alone. It took nearly 2 hours. The ground was harder than expected. He didn't bring gloves. That's why they found blisters on his hands during the assault arrest. That's why he kept looking at them in court. He says he texted Marco because he felt bad. He says it like that might mean something. The DA pushes for no parole. The evidence is overwhelming. The public reaction even more so. The case never even reaches trial. Caleb pleads guilty to murder and improper disposal of a body. He's sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. When the sentence is read, Marco sits in the gallery and doesn't move, doesn't flinch, doesn't smile. He just closes his eyes and whispers your name again. Outside, the wind hits the courthouse flags like they're trying to take flight. Back in Brighton Cove, your flat stays exactly the same. Toothbrush on the sink, jacket still on the back of the chair. Marco can't bear to clean it out. And when your parents come to visit, they leave the lamp on in your room all night, just in case you're wandering and need to find your way back. Because grief isn't linear. It loops, echoes, and even when justice is served, the silence never leaves. You'd think the case would end with Caleb's confession, that the courtroom door would close, the headlines would fade, and the town would exhale. But Brighton Cove doesn't breathe like that. Instead, the story sticks. It clings to window panes and pub chatter, to the rhythm of delivery vans echoing through the empty pre-dawn streets. Every gray sedan parked too long on a corner earns a double take. Every late-night walk feels watched. It's June now, and Marco hasn't gone back to work. He spends his days answering messages from strangers, some kind, some unhelpful, all wanting something. He's been contacted by a podcast producer, a tabloid, even a couple of true crime YouTubers offering exposure. He declines them all. Instead, he does something different. He files a request with the Brighton Cove Council to petition for security upgrades around the cliffs and the pub district, better lighting, working CCTV, emergency phones, no more dark spots. He writes in his application, no more lost footage, He calls it the Elena Initiative, and it starts picking up support. Meanwhile, D.I. Hart, still not one for public speeches, keeps digging. She can't shake the feeling that Caleb's story is incomplete. It's the way he smirks at the end of sentences. The way he says, "That's all I remember," like he's daring you to prove otherwise. So, she reopens his delivery logs. Caleb's van had GPS installed by Granger's Bakery, but only starting in 2018. Everything before that, just pen and paper. The old records are handwritten and chaotic, but one thing stands out on May 11th, the night you vanished. Caleb skipped his usual stop at Pearl's Diner. It's a regular spot, reliable, staffed, lit, easy to verify. But he bypassed it entirely. Why? She pulls surveillance from a nearby petrol station, just a quarter-mile from Pearl's. The footage is degraded, but there's a time-stamped clip showing a vehicle matching Caleb's description idling across the street for almost 20 minutes. No deliveries, no activity, just waiting. She rewinds, plays it again. There's a glint of movement in the passenger seat. You, slumped, motionless, maybe already unconscious, maybe not. It's a small detail, but damning. Caleb's claim that he drove straight to your car, gone. And now there's visual evidence he was loitering with you still inside the vehicle, unresponsive. This becomes key when the forensic techs start running cell tower triangulation again, this time on multiple phones. Yours, Marco's, Caleb's, and the burner. A new pattern emerges. Caleb's route didn't just drift toward the cliffs, it zigzagged. He made stops, pauses, almost like he was looking for somewhere. And the weirdest part, he briefly doubled back toward town before finally choosing Cliff's End, just for 5 minutes. 5 minutes where his phone pinged a quiet residential street, a cul-de-sac behind an old vacant house. Hart sends a team to check it out. You know, there's a term in forensic psychology called spatial signature. It refers to the pattern a killer leaves behind in the geography of their movements. Most people act within comfort zones. Caleb, it seems, was circling his shame behind the abandoned house. In a patch of dry overgrowth, investigators find a shallow hole filled in recently, not big enough for a body. But inside, a shoe, not yours, someone else's. And beneath that, a necklace. It's a small heart locket, still intact. Inside is a tiny photo of a girl with curly red hair and braces, smiling in front of Brighton Cove Pier. The girl's name is May Templeton. She went missing in 2014. She was never connected to Caleb. Until now, the necklace is turned over to cold case officers. The Templeton family is notified. May's mother, who had long given up hope, now finds herself thrust into the spotlight again. Grief, once buried, becomes fresh, raw, and she, too, begins to speak your name. Elena led us to her, she tells reporters. If not for that poor girl, my daughter's case would have stayed in a box forever. It creates a ripple effect. Other families come forward, 3 more, all with daughters who vanished between 2013 and 2016. Similar MO, late-night disappearances, limited physical evidence, untraceable leads, all within a 50-mile radius of Caleb's former delivery routes. Suddenly, Caleb isn't a one-time killer. He's a suspected serial predator. Media catches on. Brighton Cove, once known for its sleepy seascapes and gull murals, becomes national news. A documentary team sets up shop. They use drone footage of the cliffs, slow pans of your memorial outside the gull's nest, and voiceovers too dramatic for real life. But people watch, and more importantly, people remember. Historians still argue whether the invention of the printing press actually changed the pace of justice or just gave it better marketing. In this case, exposure forces momentum. Caleb is formally linked, though not yet charged, to 2 other disappearances. Forensic teams reopen old evidence, matching partial DNA fragments from under one victim's fingernails to the same degraded profile found in Caleb's van. It's enough. A second indictment is filed. Caleb doesn't react. He doesn't even blink. Marco, on the other hand, starts sleeping again, only lightly, and always with the lamp on. But the nightmares, those slow choking dreams where he's reaching for your hand just as it's pulled beneath the earth, don't visit as often anymore. He starts walking different streets, paths you never took together. He still carries your scarf, but now it lives folded in his wallet instead of around his neck. There's progress in that. And one night, while sitting at cliff's end, legs dangling over the ledge where the sea scrapes the base of the cliff like teeth on bone, he says it out loud. I forgive you for leaving, but I'll never forgive the world for making it so easy. And in the wind, in the rhythmic crashing of waves against stone, there's something almost like a reply. You wouldn't expect a delivery log to be terrifying. But when investigators lay Caleb's roots out on a wall in the incident room, color-coded, day by day, pub to pub, bakery to bakery, the shape that forms isn't just a web, it's a snare. There's a strange consistency in the gaps, a particular Tuesday stop that vanishes for 3 months, then reappears. A small grocery in Haverford that never got deliveries according to their manager, despite being on the sheet, and a handful of fringe addresses, no businesses, just places, coordinates. That point to things like a fishing hut, a burned-down boathouse, and an overgrown orchard. Each gap is a ghost. These search teams, now operating across 2 counties, dig into these sites one by one. They don't always find remains. Sometimes it's just fibers, sometimes disturbed earth. But each new finding rewrites the story. Caleb wasn't disorganized, he was compulsively neat. Not a man caught in a moment of panic, but a pattern maker, and that changes everything. A behavioral analyst from Scotland Yard gets involved. She's soft-spoken, prefers coffee to tea, and wears cardigans so fuzzy she looks like she fell out of a cottagecore dream. But when she speaks in the incident room, people listen. Look at the timing, she says, tapping a chart. His killings tend to follow personal rejection, a failed date, a disciplinary report, a flatmate moving out. The emotional trigger is loneliness, but what follows is logistics. He plans routes with disposal points in mind. In other words, you weren't an accident. You were a part of a system. Back in Brighton Cove, the tension has curdled. The town wants closure, not complexity. Local papers push out op-eds titled, "Why didn't we see it?" and "Could more have been done?" The bakery shuts down, unable to recover from the stain on its brand. The only thing still open every night, your memorial, the base of the cliffs, has become sacred ground. People bring seashells, small candles, even nursing textbooks, with notes scrawled in the margins. One girl leaves a pink high heel and a sticky note that says, "I made it home. You should have too." Marco visits less frequently now, but when he does, he goes alone. No more interviews, no more press, just the two of you, the cold sea breeze, and his quiet thank you for every small win that's come since you were found. You know, in early colonial America, there was a practice where victims of unsolved crimes were buried with their shoes off. It symbolized the unfinished walk of justice. Marcos started reading things like that. Quiet rituals, symbolic restitution. He says it helps. Meanwhile, D.I. Hart receives a letter. It's from a woman named Heather. She's a nurse now, 2 towns over. But in 2017, she worked briefly at a cafe along Caleb's route. She writes, "He used to watch me take out the trash. Always polite. Always too polite. I didn't think much of it until your case broke. But one night, he offered me a ride. Said it was raining. I told him no. He got weirdly quiet. Left without buying anything. The next morning, there was a dent in the dumpster, like someone had kicked it. I thought it was nothing, but I haven't stopped thinking about it since. I just wanted someone to know." Hart calls her in, records the story. It doesn't lead to charges. There's no crime, no evidence, but it adds weight to the truth everyone's learning. Caleb stalked. He watched. He waited for moments that didn't look dangerous. That's the thing. Monsters don't always snarl. Sometimes, they offer you a seat and ask how your night's going. And then comes the moment no one expected. During a follow-up excavation at the old orchard, one of Caleb's obscure log entries teams uncover partial remains, bones, badly decomposed, wrapped in a gardening tarp. It takes weeks, but forensic odontologists eventually identify the remains through dental records. It's Sophie Lane, the girl whose earring was found in Caleb's flat. She went missing in 2016, blonde, 19. Art student, last seen leaving a house party after saying she wasn't feeling well. Her parents never stopped searching. When D.I. Hart calls them, Sophie's father says, "I always knew she was near. I just didn't know how far away near could feel." The discovery prompts another wave of charges. Caleb's being formally linked to 5 disappearances now. Publicly, he still says nothing. No interviews, no apologies, just a cold courtroom shuffle, a bowed head, and silence like steel. You know, historians still argue whether medieval public executions were about justice or just fear management. In Caleb's case, the court doesn't have to shout. The truth is loud enough now. Back in Brighton Cove, Marco receives something unexpected in the mail. It's a small envelope. No return address. Inside is a photo, an old Polaroid from your first semester of nursing school. You're in scrubs, holding a plastic heart model, making a goofy face. On the back, someone has written in blocky pen, "The world was better with her in it." There's no name, no explanation, just that. He frames it, hangs it in the hallway, just between the bathroom and the kitchen. Not too showy, not too private. A place you'd walk past 10 times a day without thinking about it, which, in a way, is perfect, because remembrance doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it's just about refusing to let someone disappear again. It's early autumn when Marco walks past the gull's nest for the first time in months. The air is cool, that in-between kind of cold, where you're not sure if you need a coat or just courage. The pub's still open, but the crowd's thinner, the laughter softer, the neon sign buzzes, but the S flickers now one of those small, eerie malfunctions nobody ever seems in a rush to fix. He doesn't go inside, just stands across the street, looking up at the upstairs window where you once leaned out during a staff karaoke night, shouting lyrics to a song you barely knew. He smiles, then frowns, then lets the expression collapse into that hollow neutrality. Grief often wears when it's out of energy. Then his phone buzzes. Unknown number. He hesitates, heart pounding. For a second, he's 10 seconds from the past again. He's back in your flat, checking your messages, waiting for answers that never came. But this isn't Caleb. This is you, in a different way. The message is a screenshot, an anonymous post from a support group forum. It reads, "I was attacked 2 years ago after a night out. I never reported it. I didn't think anyone would believe me. But I just read about Elena Rivera, and I realize now that silence doesn't protect anyone but the one who hurt you. I've decided to talk to the police tomorrow. For me, for her, for all of us. No signature, just a ripple. That's what you've become now. A wave with weight." Word gets out that the woman unnamed, late 20s, bartender from Saltwood, goes in for a formal interview 2 days later. She provides a description, a timeline, even the kind of aftershave her attacker wore. It's consistent with Caleb's known behavior. The assault happened the same week he claimed to have gone camping. It's not admissible in court, but it's noted, it's recorded, and it's one more thread pulling Caleb's mask off stitch by stitch. D.I. Hart reads the transcript twice, then passes it to the behavioral analyst, who underlines one phrase. "He smiled the whole time." That same unnatural smile, too clean, too white, never reaching the eyes that showed up in every description from survivors, co-workers, even the guy who used to restock milk at the bakery. Smiles lie, teeth don't. Forensic odontology was already instrumental in identifying Sophie Lane. But now, they take it further. They re-examine bite mark evidence from a 2015 assault once thought unrelated, different county, different context. The victim survived. She described being bitten during the struggle. The old case file had a dental mold, but it was filed under inconclusive. Technology wasn't advanced enough then to confirm it. Now, with updated software and Caleb's dental profile on file, they rerun the analysis. It's a match, 96% probability, statistically significant, prosecutable. A 6th charge is added. You know, in medieval France, convicted criminals were sometimes branded not as punishment, but as a permanent warning to others. Today, we use registries, databases, mugshots, but none of those ever feel permanent enough. This match changes public perception. Caleb is no longer just a man who snapped, he's officially recognized as a serial predator. National outlets return to Brighton Cove. The coast is swarmed again by camera crews. Documentaries reboot their segments. But something's different this time. The focus isn't just on Caleb, it's on you, on Elena, On the ripple effect your case has had across a dozen lives, 3 counties, and countless unreported stories. Marco gets asked for interviews again. He still says no, but he sends one quote to a journalist working on a long-form piece. It reads, "She mattered. That's all." And she still does. Meanwhile, the forensic team decides to fully scan Caleb's van again, not with traditional methods, but with trace chemical luminescence. They apply a new reagent that reacts with long-degraded biological material, and in the smallest crevice between the lining and the sliding door, they find a flake. Microscopic, dried blood, likely skin cells. They run it through a mitochondrial DNA profile. It doesn't match you, or Sophie, or the known victims. It's someone new. This changes everything. The flake is preserved, cataloged, marked for future testing. It could be contamination, or it could be the first clue to an entirely unknown victim. Caleb, of course, says nothing. His attorney files a motion to suppress the new evidence. It fails. The court allows it on the basis of pattern behavior. Caleb's expression doesn't twitch, but D.I. Hart sees something shift in his posture. A slouch, a flinch, as if the inevitability of exposure has finally begun to drip through. You know, historians still argue whether Pandora's box was meant to be a story of punishment or liberation. The box is open now, no matter what Caleb wants. And what's left isn't just evil, it's truth. Marco returns to the cliffs once more. It's quiet this time. No vigils, no press. He sits on the same bench where you took your first nursing exam call. The one where you yelled, "I passed," into the wind and accidentally startled a dog walker. He breathes, deep, steady. There's still a tightness in his chest, but it's softer now. Less like a scream, more like a sigh. He leaves a daisy on the bench and walks away. No fanfare, no final words, just the fading crunch of gravel under his shoes and the wind in your scarf, tied around the bench's iron frame fluttering gently, like it's waving back. The woman who got away never wanted to speak again. Not to her therapist, not to the police, certainly not to the media. But the news about you, the images of the cliffs, the courtroom sketches of Caleb's pale, expressionless face unlocked something. And when her story finally comes out, it's less like a testimony and more like an aftershock. Her name is Dana Whitmore. She was 26 at the time, a medical receptionist. The assault happened just outside of Reading, 2 hours east of Brighton Cove. In August of 2018, she'd left a friend's birthday party early, tipsy but still lucid. Her phone battery was low, her ride canceled. And that's when a friendly stranger in a bakery uniform offered her a lift. She remembers the logo stitched into his jacket. Granger's, the same place that fired Caleb for unreliable behavior just 3 months before your disappearance. She says she hesitated, but the man had that same disarming smile, like he knew what you were thinking and wanted to help you feel better about it. Inside the van, she got a strange feeling. The air was too clean. Not bakery clean, hospital clean, clinical, and the doors were locked too fast. She didn't wait for the rest. As the van slowed near a junction, she unbuckled, yanked the door handle, and rolled herself out. Broke her wrist, sprained her ankle, but she ran. She never reported it, not until she saw your name in the news. Now, she's sitting across from D.I. Hart, telling the whole story. Her memory is detailed, sharp, almost rehearsed in the way survivors often rehearse things they never want to forget. Dana's case fills in a missing year in Caleb's timeline. The months between Sophie Lane and you, the calm before the next storm, another near murder that failed. Because Dana's fear outweighed Caleb's charm, forensic analysts dig into her case. They find one lingering trace, a smear of Caleb's blood on the inside panel of her torn dress. Not visible to the naked eye, but preserved nonetheless. Another unshakable connection. You know, in ancient Japanese lore, there's a belief that certain objects absorb trauma. Swords, mirrors, even garments. Dana's dress wrapped in a police evidence bag for nearly 7 years now becomes part of your story too. The confession Caleb gave during your case begins to splinter. At first, his legal team calls Dana's account unreliable, unverified, unrelated. But once the DNA match is confirmed, their tune changes. Quietly, strategically, another plea deal is drafted. Caleb agrees to a life extension, additional years without parole, public acknowledgement of attempted abduction, formal apology to Dana. She declines the apology. "I don't want words from him," I want silence. But she accepts the public recognition. Her name is no longer a footnote. This begins a strange pattern. More women step forward, some with tangible evidence, others with stories eerily similar to yours. Late night rides, foggy memories, suspicious bruises, a smile that went from charming to terrifying in a matter of seconds. And all of them say the same thing. They weren't believed. They were told they'd misread the situation, or had too much to drink, or maybe just made a mistake. But now, with your case cracking everything open, they're finally being heard. Marco reads every single account. He bookmarks them, annotates them, highlights phrases like he wouldn't take no for an answer, and I felt like I was already disappearing. He attends a survivor advocacy meeting in Brighton, sits in the back, silent, watching as people like Dana speak not as victims, but as witnesses to each other's survival. He doesn't say much that night, just introduces himself, says your name, and thanks them. Later, in a quiet hallway outside the meeting, Dana catches him before he leaves. Says, I think she fought. I don't know how I know that, but I do. Marco nods. She always did. Back at the station, D.I. Hart is re-interviewing Caleb again. Not about you, not about Dana. This time, she wants to know about an old delivery he made to a closed boarding school on the edge of a forest reserve in East Sussex. It wasn't on the logbooks, but there was a partial GPS ping on his phone in 2015 that placed him there. It's a dead zone now abandoned, overgrown, but it's also the last known location of a girl named Jessica Reeds, age 20, missing for 9 years. Caleb stares at Hart when she brings up the school, doesn't speak, but his eyes betray him, just barely. A flicker, the way a fire sputters when it's almost out. She pushes. Why go there? He shrugs, says, just driving, alone. Another shrug. Later, Hart tells her team, he doesn't need to lie well, he just needs to say less than the truth. A search is planned for the school site. Ground-penetrating radar is ordered. The team prepares to search the grounds in October. When the brush is thin and the soil softens, Marco doesn't go, but he waits for the results like someone waits for the tide. You know, historians still debate the reliability of ancient Roman auspices, signs from the gods, interpreted through bird movements. It was their way of seeking answers from randomness. Marco doesn't believe in signs, but he notices that every time new evidence emerges, the wind at Cliff's End picks up, just for a moment, like your name moving through the air. And then one morning, Marco wakes to a message from your old nursing mentor, Professor Linda Nash. She says, I still keep Elena's notes in my drawer. Her handwriting was a mess, but her ideas were always gentle. She attaches a photo of the last note you ever gave her. It says, people aren't made to vanish. You just have to look harder. Marco saves it to his phone, sets it as his lock screen, because some things are meant to be read over and over, even if the author's gone. The arrest that finally took Caleb Morgan off the streets had nothing to do with you. Not officially. It was June 4, 2019. 3 weeks after you disappeared, when police in Lancashire picked him up on suspicion of assault, a woman named Clara found in a ditch, bleeding, shoes missing, clutching a cracked phone with a dead battery. She'd flagged down a passing motorist after crawling half a mile from where she said the van left her. Her story was disjointed. Trauma will do that. But she remembered 3 things with perfect clarity. The man had soft hands. Baker's hands, she said. He told her his name was Cameron, but stuttered once and nearly said something else. He smiled the whole time. You're starting to see a pattern, aren't you? The officer who responded to the call noted that Clara's injuries didn't match a fall. She had ligature marks, a dislocated shoulder, and an abrasion across her jaw that looked eerily like a steering wheel impression. A forensic nurse later determined she'd likely been strangled partially, not fatally, but long enough to cause petechiae in her eyes. That's not an accident. That's an attempt. Caleb's van was spotted on a local CCTV camera an hour before Clara's 911 call. He'd pulled into a petrol station for gum and a prepaid phone, another burner. It was the same one he used to send that chilling, "Hey, this is Caleb" message to Marco. The irony, if he'd never texted Marco, if he hadn't tried to inject himself into your story, if he'd just stayed silent, he might have remained a ghost. But that message made him real. It placed him at the center. And when Clara's assault surfaced, all the threads converged. The name, the smile. The van, a forensic team was dispatched to search Caleb's vehicle. You know this part already, the bleach, the hair under the mat, the cargo space cleaner than any bakery van had a right to be. But what they didn't tell the public was this. Under the front passenger seat, lodged in the track rail, they found a small, torn scrap of receipt. Not from the night Clara was attacked, from your night. A dated line item from the gull's nest. Someone had stuffed it in their purse and lost it, and somehow, through whatever chaotic shuffle happens in cars and vans, it had been kicked under the seat and forgotten. It had your signature on the tip line, in messy, curly letters, Elena R. That was the moment they knew it wasn't just circumstantial anymore. You had been in Caleb's van, alive, likely unconscious, definitely never dropped off safely. D.I. Hard says that piece of paper was like finding your voice again. She brought it into the interview room and slid it across the table toward Caleb. "You remember her now?" she asked. He stared at the slip for a full 30 seconds before finally responding. "She said she was cold." Hart didn't blink. "What did you do then?" "I turned the heat on," he said. Such a small lie, such a grotesque one. You know, in ancient Mesopotamia, judges used to rely on ordeals to determine truth, plunging hands into boiling water, walking across fire. The idea was that truth would shield the innocent, but in Caleb's case, it wasn't fire or water that exposed him. It was paper. It was evidence. Mundane, boring, beautiful evidence. That receipt became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. A timestamp, a location, a name, a victim. The judge approved an emergency warrant. Caleb's flat was searched that night. You remember the rest, your belongings tucked behind a wall panel, the lip gloss, the bracelet, the photo keychain. But something you don't know. They also found a crumpled note in his bedside drawer. It was scribbled on bakery order paper, ripped from a pad. It said, "Some girls are too loud. Some forget they asked for it. Some leave their phones on." That's not a confession. That's a worldview. And the prosecution made sure the jury saw every inch of it. During the bail hearing, Caleb's lawyer argued that he was a non-violent offender with no history of aggression, that he'd panicked, that your death was unintended. The prosecutor responded by holding up the torn receipt, then the burner phone, then your bracelet. She said, "This wasn't panic, this was predation." And the judge agreed. No bail, no house arrest, straight to remand, straight to solitary. Marco didn't attend the bail hearing. He was still on the cliffs, folding your scarf, reading your old nursing notes aloud like prayers. He didn't need to hear the ruling to know what justice felt like. It felt like breathing again. And Clara, she survived. She testified. Her voice shook, but she didn't waver. She brought the same purse she'd carried the night Caleb tried to kill her, still torn at the strap, and placed it gently on the stand as if to say, "I'm still here." You know, historians still argue whether the medieval concept of wergild, a person's life translated into monetary value, was justice or cruelty. Clara said in court, "My value isn't in gold. It's in the fact that I wasn't his last victim." Her testimony sealed Caleb's fate. Even before the rest of the charges came down, the judge called it one of the most disturbing behavioral patterns the court had ever seen. Marco, watching the news that night, didn't smile, but he whispered thank you. To Clara, to Hart, to you. Because even if justice arrived late, it arrived walking in your footsteps. It begins with dirt, the kind that sticks under fingernails, the kind that clings to tires and fabric and memory. Dirt from a remote stretch of cliffside just west of Brighton Cove, clay-rich, pale, and full of tiny flecks of crushed shell. Not something you'd track in unless you'd spent time digging. And that's exactly what forensic teams find embedded deep in the treads of Caleb Morgan's delivery van. You see, after Caleb's arrest, investigators pull the vehicle apart piece by piece. They send the tires for soil analysis. They comb through this cargo area again with updated UV-reactive enzymes. They even take samples from the air vents, places most suspects don't think to clean. And what they find is damning, because there's not just dirt. There's trace human DNA on the underside of the rubber floor mat mitochondrial material consistent with you. There's also long strands of hair wound into the seatbelt latch. More than one. Dark, wavy, different lengths, some of them you, others not, and hidden behind a panel in the side door deep, where a manufacturer's tool would be needed to open it. There's a small velvet hair tie, purple, with one small blood speck on the elastic. It doesn't belong to you. That blood will later match another missing woman, Isabel Dwyer, vanished in 2017. A name long lost to the unsolved file stacks until your case cracked everything open. At this point, the evidence board is no longer a timeline. It's a mosaic of lives. You know, in the Victorian era, it was common for families to keep mourning jewelry rings or lockets containing the hair of a loved one. Tangible grief, physical remembrance. Caleb's van has become a twisted parody of that idea, a rolling reliquary of violence. D.I. Hart stares at the mounting DNA profiles with grim satisfaction. She orders full sequencing on every partial hit, coordinating with missing persons units across 3 counties. It's slow, meticulous, but vital. Each match widens the net. Each match gives another family a name, a place, a reason. Meanwhile, Caleb is moved to a high-security facility, not for his safety though officially. That's the reason, but because too many inmates have started whispering his name. He's not infamous. He's not respected. He's reviled. Predators aren't popular, even among the condemned. Inside, he maintains silence. Doesn't write. Doesn't speak beyond basic needs. A clinical psychologist assigned to assess him writes in her notes, Mr. Morgan exhibits flat affect, suppressed hostility, and compulsive sanitation behavior. He is emotionally vacant except when discussing control. That's the word that keeps surfacing. In every profile, every analysis, Caleb didn't kill because he lost control. He killed to have it. And it's in that context that his final confession comes. Not in court, not under pressure, but during a taped psychological evaluation. The psychologist, Dr. Levin, is running a standard empathy inventory. Caleb fails every category. But then, when prompted with a question about regret, he offers something unprompted. He says, I never meant for her to die. Not Elena. She was supposed to wake up, just scared enough, just quiet enough. There's a pause, a scratch of pen on clipboard. Then, Dr. Levin asks, but she didn't wake up. Caleb replies, almost irritated. She woke up, but she fought too much. And then, it was quiet again. That's the line Marco hears when the DA shares the tape. He listens once, then again, then deletes the file from his inbox, because he doesn't need Caleb's voice in his head. He's already carrying enough of yours. You know, historians still debate the motivations behind medieval Charterstone's large engraved boulders that supposedly marked safe ground or oaths. Some think they were meant to anchor truth in the landscape itself. Marco imagines one at Cliff's End, not a gravestone, a Charterstone. Something that says, she was here and she mattered. And speaking of the cliffs, they're quieter now after your body was recovered. The search team filled in the site. Grass has begun to regrow. The candle wax stains have faded from the memorial path, but someone still leaves fresh flowers every week. Always the same. White freesia and forget-me-nots. No one knows who. Marco won't say, but the bench still holds your scarf, gently retied after every storm. In Brighton Cove, locals begin to shift. The Elena Initiative. Marco launched, remember that, the petition for better lighting, security, and CCTV. It's approved. New polls go up. Emergency call boxes installed. Pub managers are now required to log closing time escorts. A rideshare checkpoint is piloted near the pier, and in front of the cliffs, they erect a small sign, a memorial. It reads, in memory of Elena Rivera, Gentayton, 998-2019. A life that lit the dark, a name that woke the silent. We remember, we protect. You don't need a statue or a holiday. You have that. And Marco, he finally returns to work, part-time. He's different now, softer around the edges, quieter, but he brings a photo of you and sets it on his desk. When coworkers ask, he says, she taught me how to notice people. Back in the forensic labs, the blood flake from Caleb's van. The unknown DNA still hasn't been matched yet, but Hart keeps it flagged. Because justice isn't just about the known, it's about refusing to forget the ones who haven't spoken yet. And you're part of that refusal now. It's quiet out on the cliffs when Caleb returns, not as a visitor, but as a reluctant tour guide under armed escort. This isn't a public appearance. There are no reporters, no weeping families, no dramatic sunsets to frame the scene. Just gray sky, patchy fog, and a dozen boots crunching on brittle grass as the team leads Caleb to the precise location where you were found. He's in cuffs, of course, hands shackled in front of him, ankles linked, a guard on each side. But D.I. Hart is there too, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. She's not expecting tears. She's not expecting redemption. She just wants answers. Because there's still one more mystery. In Caleb's confession, he mentioned a second location, a phrase muttered in passing, barely noticed at the time. It wasn't the first hole I dug. So now, under court order, he's been brought to retrace the path of that first dig. The one investigators never found. The one that might lead to another missing girl, or perhaps nothing at all. With Caleb, absence always seems to carry weight. They reach a bend in the trail, about 40 yards east of your site, where the cliff curves in like a hook. Caleb stops walking. His eyes scan the earth. For a moment, he looks less like a prisoner and more like a man trying to remember where he misplaced his wallet. Then, wordlessly, he gestures toward a large patch of dry grass. A forensics team moves in with shovels. You know, in ancient Greek tragedy, the term anagnorisis describes the moment a character experiences a critical discovery when the truth becomes unavoidable. For the search team, this is it. Within an hour, they uncover bone. At first, just one long, thin, curved slightly, then more. It's a shallow grave. No tarp, just the earth and a few items wrapped in plastic grocery bags. A rusted necklace, a cracked phone case, a faded hoodie with a community college logo. The remains will later be identified as belonging to Haley Roth, a girl who vanished in 2015, last seen at a late-night food stand after missing her bus. Her case never made headlines. Her family moved away a year later. Her name slipped into the quiet backlog of forgotten people. Until now, Caleb says nothing during the dig. When asked for comment, he shrugs. She wasn't loud. That's what he says. She wasn't loud. The words hang in the fog like smoke that refuses to disperse. Hart doesn't react. Not in front of him. But later, she'll throw her clipboard into the back of her car so hard it cracks the corner. Because justice is exhausting, especially when the monster seems bored with it. The discovery of Haley Roth's body confirms what most already feared. Caleb wasn't escalating, he was repeating, perfecting a system, not a spree. Back in Brighton Cove, Marco watches the updates quietly. He doesn't need to see Caleb's face anymore. He's memorized it in court, in nightmares. He just wants to know names, the ones who were lost, the ones you led back. He starts a spreadsheet simple, color-coded. Each name gets a row, date, location, what was found, notes on whether a family's been notified. It's meticulous. He says it helps, says it makes the grief feel less like a landslide and more like sandbags manageable. Piece by piece. You know, historians still debate whether ancient Celtic cairns, those piled stone mounds left to mark graves or waypoints, were ever meant to last. Most collapsed eventually, but that didn't matter. What mattered was building them. The ritual, the intention. Marco's spreadsheet is a cairn, just digital. And as for Caleb, he returns to his cell. He doesn't ask for a lawyer, doesn't challenge the charges. Another body, another confession, another life sentence added to the pile. He's not eligible for parole. Not ever. But something unexpected happens. Someone leaks a copy of Caleb's original psychological profile to a journalist. It's not sensationalized, it's clinical. But the descriptions are enough to cause a wave of public outcry. High-functioning narcissism. Preoccupation with cleanliness as a metaphor for control, emotionally hollow, interpersonal mimicry. The media latches onto a term from the report, empathy masking, the ability to perform empathy without actually feeling it. Suddenly, everyone has an opinion. There are debates, podcasts, threads, think pieces. Could someone like him really fake it that well? Were there warning signs we all ignored? And for once, the narrative shifts. It's not about Caleb's cleverness. It's about the world's willingness to excuse people who perform kindness without ever demonstrating it. Marco watches it all unfold. He doesn't participate. Instead, he writes a letter, not to Caleb, to Haley's family. He writes, "I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry it took my Elena to find your daughter. I wish that wasn't the cost. I wish we could have warned you sooner, but I promise you this, she's remembered now. And she's not alone." He gets a letter back 3 weeks later, typed neat. It ends with, "Your Elena pulled our Haley out of the ground. That's more than anyone ever did for her before. You've become that now. Not a warning, a light. The kind that shows where others were hidden. The kind that cuts through the dirt. You'd think, by now, there'd be no more to uncover. Caleb's in prison. The bodies have been found. The family's notified. The court case is closed." But Brighton Cove doesn't work like that. It holds its ghosts a little longer. It doesn't believe in clean endings. It's late November when the soil stirs again this time. Not on the cliffs, but beneath concrete. You see, as part of the ongoing investigation, a cold case task force re-examines old construction permits tied to Caleb's former addresses. One line item sticks out: a delivery made to a property he briefly rented in 2016. A narrow townhouse in a decaying part of Saltwood. The permit: basement repairs, partial floor replacement. Odd, considering the building didn't have a basement. Or so everyone thought. A warrant is issued. The current tenant is relocated. Forensics arrives with drills and jackhammers, their breath fogging in the winter air. Underneath a false wall, they discover a hatch crudely built, disguised beneath layers of plywood and tile. And inside, a crawl space, dust-choked, damp, about 4 feet high, just enough room to kneel, just enough room to keep something hidden without much light or ventilation. They find a single duffel bag, and in it, clothing, jewelry, a cracked flip phone, a driver's license belonging to a girl named Ruby Chen, last seen in 2014, reported missing after a concert in Canterbury. Ruby was 19. Her disappearance never made it past local news. No body has been found. But the items in that bag are hers. Her mother confirms it through tears over video call, especially the gold chain. She used to suck on the clasp when she was nervous. She says, "I'd recognize the teeth marks anywhere." It's enough to reclassify the case. Another charge. Another family brought out of limbo. You know, in ancient Persian funerals, mourners were instructed to wail loudly, not just for grief, but so the gods would know someone was loved. The silence Ruby's family endured for a decade. That wasn't peace. That was erasure. Now, Ruby's name is added to Marco's spreadsheet, row 7. He stares at it for a long time before he types in the location, Saltwood Crawl Space. There's an odd finality to that phrase, like something from a ghost story. But it's real. All of it is. Marco's gotten good at grieving efficiently. He now volunteers part-time with a support group for families of missing persons. Not as a counselor, he's not ready for that, but as someone who makes coffee, manages the spreadsheets, brings tissues when someone loses composure. It's the kind of service that doesn't ask for applause, just presence. Sometimes presence is everything. One afternoon, while locking up after a meeting, he finds a sticky note on the bulletin board. It says, "I didn't speak when I should have. I won't make that mistake again." It's unsigned. But Marco pins it to the wall anyway, because it belongs there. Among the names, the maps, the faces staring out from fading flyers. Meanwhile, back at the prison, Caleb remains unreadable. His behavior hasn't changed. He's neither defiant nor remorseful. He follows orders, attends mandated sessions, eats all his meals. One psychologist describes him as unshakably consistent, but there's a note in his most recent file. Subject no longer requests news coverage, does not inquire about legal updates, shows indifference toward new charges, potential onset of psychological numbness or irreversible apathy. Translation: he's done pretending, or maybe he's just finally met a silence he didn't create. Brighton Cove, however, is finding its voice. The local council approves plans for a permanent memorial along the cliffs, not just for you, but for every woman recovered since. It won't be statues, nothing grand, just a winding trail lined with etched stones, one for each name. The first one goes in on a windy Tuesday in December. It reads, Elena Rivera. You left the lights on, you know. Historians still argue whether oral tradition is more reliable than written records. Whether stories passed down through memory carry more soul than paper ever could. But no one argues about the stories you sparked. Because your name didn't just mark a tragedy, it marked a turning point. The following week, a mother named Tanya stands up in a council meeting and asks why her daughter's missing case was closed in 2011 with insufficient evidence. She doesn't scream, doesn't cry, just says, if Elena's parents hadn't fought, we'd have one more unsolved. The room falls silent, and then someone claps, one clap, then another, until the whole room echoes with it. Not applause, not celebration, recognition. The kind that carries weight, the kind that keeps people from disappearing again. And Marco, he doesn't clap, he just stands. They hold the sentencing hearing for the final set of charges on a cloudy Thursday, April 9th, 2020. No crowd, no press allowed inside, just a handful of families in the gallery, a court stenographer with tired eyes, and Caleb Morgan shackled at the wrists and ankles, still wearing that same washed-out beige uniform like it's a second skin. There are 7 confirmed victims now, 5 murdered, 2 who survived. The judge reads the names one by one. He pauses between each, as if allowing space for the air to absorb them. Ruby Chen, Haley Roth, Sophie Lane, Elena Rivera, and then the survivors Dana, Clara. The courtroom remains still. No saw, no shouting. Everyone here has run out of sound. What remains is silence so tight it feels threaded through your bones. The prosecutor reads a prepared statement on behalf of the victims' families. Marco helped write it. You can tell his fingerprints are all over the tone. Calm, devastating. Just enough precision to cut without drawing blood. It says, you wanted to erase them. Instead, they've written themselves into the laws, the systems, the breath of this town. You will not be remembered as anything but a shadow they stepped through. Caleb doesn't react. When offered the chance to speak, he refuses. It's not a dramatic refusal. He simply looks up, shrugs, and says no. There's something grotesquely fitting about that. After years of forcing himself into people's lives, his final act is absence. The judge delivers his sentence, 7 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 65 years for related charges. Then he adds something rare, a personal comment for the record. This court finds not only guilt, but a profound lack of humanity. This is not justice, it's containment. And then, like that, it's done. The doors open, the chairs creak, the world tilts back toward routine. But for the families, routine will never mean the same thing again. You know, in medieval Iceland, verdicts weren't sealed in ink. They were spoken aloud in public forums, then committed to memory by law speakers' human archives of guilt and consequence. The idea was, if enough people remember it, it can't be undone. Marco believes in that. That's why he doesn't leave immediately after the hearing. He stands outside the courthouse, scarf in his hands, and listens to the wind. Just listens. No speeches, no interviews, just memory. Because memory, in this town, has become its own kind of resistance. Brighton. Cove is different now. Not better, but different. The Elna initiative has expanded beyond the cliffs. Several nearby towns have adopted similar safety protocols. A scholarship fund for young women pursuing forensic science is established in your name. The first recipient, a girl named Priya, says during her acceptance, I never met Elena, but I study because she can't. Marco attends the ceremony but sits near the back. Afterward, he gives Priya a small token, your old library card, laminated. She never returned this, he says, smiling softly. Seems right you should carry it now. And in your flat, yes, he still lives there, part-time. He's turned your old desk into something new. It's not a shrine. You wouldn't have liked that. It's more like an information center. Notes on missing persons cases, cold case updates, articles, timelines, a wall-mounted map with the string connections, like something from a detective drama, but neater, gentler. He doesn't want revenge anymore. He wants recovery. one family at a time. Meanwhile, D.I. Hart announces her retirement. She's quiet about it, as expected. No press release, just a box of belongings, a firm handshake, and a card from the department that says, "Thank you for seeing the patterns." She keeps one thing from the Rivera case file, a sticky note that Marco left behind during one of his early visits. It says, "She didn't vanish. She was taken. There's a difference." Hart pins it to her refrigerator at home, right next to a faded photo of her own daughter. Because reminders matter, especially the ones we didn't know we needed. You know, historians still debate whether memory is more preserved in archives or in community, whether the past belongs to institutions or to stories. But this one's been passed from paper to bone to streetlight. Because your story didn't end on a cliff. It ended in a courtroom, in a law, in a girl who decided to speak, in a man who refused to stop walking until you were found. And now, every step forward in Brighton Cove feels like a step taken for you, even the small ones, especially the small ones. Brighton Cove never really went back to sleep. Even now, years later, you can still feel it in the way the street lamps hold their glow a little longer at night. The way the wind carries quieter through the alleys. There's a hush to this town, not fear, not quite, but a sort of reverence, as if the place itself knows what was lost here, and it's trying to tread more gently. The cliffside trail, once just a narrow dirt footpath edged with gorse, has become something else entirely. People walk it daily now. Not for fitness, not for the view, but because it feels like a kind of chapel, a quiet communion between memory and air. There's the bench where your scarf still flutters, even though no one will admit to tying it back up after storms. There's the first memorial stone yours set at the trailhead. Others have been added. Haley, Ruby, Sophie, Isabel. A mosaic of names, soft as sea glass, sharpened only by the lives they once held. Marco walks the trail once a week. He doesn't always stay long. Sometimes he just touches your name like it's a lock he still keeps the key for. Other times, he sits on the bench, closes his eyes, and listens to the wind, not for signs or voices, but just for the quiet reminder that he's still here, that you were. He lives somewhere new now, not far, just enough distance to build fresh rhythms. But your flat remains, rented to a graduate student who doesn't mind the occasional drop-in from a man who brings homemade soup and stories. Marco never tells her the full history, only enough to say, this place belonged to someone unforgettable. She leaves the desk untouched, keeps your old lamp, says it helps her sleep. The Elena Rivera Foundation now hosts an annual night walk. They call it the Light Trail. People carry small candles, glow sticks, even phone flashlights as they walk the cliff path in silence. No speeches, no signs, just light moving, steady, resilient. This year, they hand out pins with your initials, ER, and a tiny freesia beside them. You know, in early Celtic myth, freesia represented trust, fidelity, the kind of devotion that doesn't ask for reward. It's fitting. Marco carries one in his coat pocket, rubs it between his fingers when words don't work. He still runs the spreadsheet, still follows missing persons forums. Sometimes he writes to families not as a representative of anything, just as someone who understands the vacuum that comes with not knowing. He never signs with his full name, just Elena's person. Sometimes that's all you need to be. And Caleb, still in prison, still silent, aging without impact. The latest reports show no behavioral changes, no therapy breakthroughs, just days turning into months into years. Inside beige walls, he fades, quietly, exactly the opposite of what he once tried to be. His name barely comes up anymore. Yours, though still spoken, still remembered, woven into new safety laws. The names of scholarship winners, the side notes of local classrooms where students are taught how to recognize signs, how to trust their instincts, how to speak louder when it counts. And in the end, that's what you became. Not just a loss, a lesson, a legacy. Because no one's vanishing like that again. Not in this town. Not without someone looking harder, longer, louder, because of you. And now, as the lights dim and the story settles into the quiet of your room, I want you to let the heaviness lift from your chest, just a little. The kind that stories like this tend to leave behind. You're safe here, in this moment, in this bed. The world can wait until mornings. Close your eyes. If you haven't already, breathe in deeply through your nose. slow enough to feel the air settle, and exhale gently, as if you're letting go of something invisible. Let your muscles soften. Unclench your jaw. Ease your shoulders back into the pillow. Outside your window, imagine the sea of Brighton Cove, gentle waves folding over themselves, brushing the shore like a lullaby. Picture the wind moving through freesia fields along the cliffs, tugging at a scarf tied to an old wooden bench. You're walking there. The path is soft beneath your feet. Each step is light, quiet, easy. The stones along the trail glow faintly. You recognize the names. You feel their peace. And in the distance, there's a light left on for you. Maybe it's a porch lamp, maybe a bedside glow, but it's warm, waiting. You follow it back. You're home, you're held, you're okay. The story is finished now. Let yourself drift. Let sleep find you gently. Good night.